If you're looking to play Warhammer casually, this video might not be for you, and I really mean that respectfully. This video is for players who are wanting to start going to events and don't have unlimited time to test and are really sick of hearing just play the meta as the only answer. And this is a video specifically for Blood Angels, but trust me, the buying guide and the conversations I'm going to be having is going to be applicable to every single army in the entire game. So this video actually started as a commissioned request from a newer competitive player, and it was such a great question that I wanted to turn it into a full-on public guide. So today we're talking about Blood Angels, and not just which units to take, but we're going to talk about why this army works. And if you're playing another army, I want you to think about why your army works. We're going to talk about what to buy so you don't waste money. I want you to think about the same concepts I'm going to discuss here and apply that to your army. And we're going to talk about how to pilot it competitively, even if you only get a few reps in a month. Right? If you want an army that's going to be rewarding initiative, creativity, and aggressive decision making, well, honestly, this is pretty much where we're going to start. So let's just start talking about some freaking Blood Angels here. All right. So why the Blood Angels? First off, your Blood Angels are going to have an extreme amount of mobility in the game. Honestly, kind of regardless of what detachment you're playing. If you're playing any of the Blood Angel detachments, you're basically going to have access, outside of maybe one, you're going to have access to Advance and Charge. Practically every single Blood Angel detachment has access to fall back and charge, some of them more so than others. But what you can see right off the bat is that you've got some form of freedom of movement in every single detachment. Not to mention, all of the detachments reward very speedy units, such as your super hyper elite jump pack infantry, in the form of whether they're going to be Death Company Marines or even your Sanguinary Guard, which we'll talk a little bit about later. Every single version of the Blood Angels actually has very high melee damage output, not just because of the detachments themselves, but because of the actual units that are being supported by the detachments. So you have your unique units, the Sanguinary Guard, for example, that have the very, very rare AP3 in melee. Not to mention, you've got other unique units, such as the Death Company, who have the native inbuilt ability just to re-roll hit rolls. This can create high damage, more or less regardless of the detachment you're running them. You could actually run these guys in a shooting detachment and still have a significant amount of melee punch, which is a very, very cool thing, and it's something that I actually took to the World Championships of Warhammer a year ago. Then you've got access to all of the Marine goodies when you're playing Blood Angels, and that's going to be your Gladiators, that's going to be your Inceptors, that's going to be your Infiltrators, all of those things. You've got access to the strongest lone ops in the entire game in 10th edition, in the form of Mephiston and the Sanguinar. And then lastly, you've got for some detachments that allow for some incredible shenanigans. So all of these reasons are why Blood Angels are kind of awesome. They get access to everything that Marines get access to, but just more speed, better melee, better lone ops. It's a good place to start. So let's start with talking about a mindset shift of how we're actually going to be playing this game. First thing, when we are running Blood Angels, you have to understand a couple things. We are playing with marine bodies, which means that you're not particularly durable. That doesn't mean you're gonna die to, someone sneezing at you. Like you have Sanguinary Guard, for example, who are -1 to be hit. Or when they're in melee, they're -1 to be wounded when they're led by a character. They're almost always going to be led by a character. They're 3 wounds. They have a 4 invulnerable save. They have a 2 up armor save. And it's really just a pretty reasonable profile that is actually very durable. So we do have durability, but ultimately we're still like T4 models that are going to be susceptible to a lot of different things in the game. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't make yourself more durable than your opponent is expecting. Trust me, when you start stacking buffs like -1 to be hit, -1 to be wounded, -1 to your AP, and a 5 feel no pain against mortals, things can definitely skew math, but you're not a particularly durable army. You're not going to be sitting there just waiting to take punches like you might if you were running the Dark Angels, who have access to the Deathwing Knights, who are one of the most durable things in the entire game. You are going to be one of the masters of speed, because outside of things like Space Elves, there are not going to be many things in the game that are faster than the Blood Angels. Having the ability to determine when you engage in combat is one of the key determining factors of Blood Angels. Blood Angels are also exceptionally damaging in combat. They deal a lot of damage, but that doesn't mean they deal the most damage. And this is a really, really important thing to understand about Blood Angels. They're not World Eaters where you just want to be full sending and tagging everything. Now, I know I'm doing a little bit of a disservice to the World Eater game plan when I simplify it to that, but you're just going to have to bear with me for the sake of this video. Yes, I understand there is more complexities to World Eaters as well, but with Blood Angels, they can't just do this red tide forward. because they actually don't have access to all the fight on depths that World Eaters do. So they're liable and susceptible to getting punched back quite hard. So even though you have very targeted precision damage, the main thing that you have to understand about playing your Blood Angels is your biggest strength is your incredible speed and the ability to determine when engagements begin. Whether you're playing on WTC terrain, UKTC terrain, or even on GW terrain, since you have that base 12-inch movement on, honestly, a huge amount of your army, whether it's going to be your Death Company with jump packs, or your Sanguinary Guard, or even just your normal jump pack Assault Intercessors, and you couple that with fallback and charge, couple that with deep strikes, couple that with advance and charges, now suddenly you're really getting to pick and choose engagements, and that is the real power of Blood Angels. So one of the things that I want you to really be considering as you're starting your Blood Angel journey is I want you to think about, what does this mean for you? You choose engagements, but you're not going to be taking punches as hard as other people. So it's not always that, hey, I'm going to kill something and want to trade 1-for-1, because you are also still a Marine army, which means your units can be quite expensive. So what we really want to focus on with our Blood Angels is making sure that where and when we cause our trauma, it's going to disrupt our opponent's scoring in a very big way. We also want to ensure that we don't have to engage until it's time to go for the throat. So what we do still enjoy is taking certain like cheaper units or high OC units to force our opponents to not be able to score early on, so that when we do punch them, we don't have to worry about scoring anymore, because now we're ready just to sweep through. So that's one of the things that we want to make sure we're doing with the Blood Angels. One of the I would call like pitfalls in the army, one of the traps that people tend to fall for, is they think that because you're so fast, you have to rush and you have to engage super early. You need to be charging turn 1. You need to be charging everything in turn 2. This is just not true. It's okay to be the patient hunter. You don't want to be a Tau because they're, fish boys, cowboys, whatever. But you do want to be the patient hunter. You want to make sure that you pick your moment. So it's about annihilation of your opponent's army, but it's also about denying your opponent's your opponent's points. And that is critical. We always have to be denying our opponent's points. And this is a huge benefit of playing a melee army. Let me lay this picture out for you. All right. If you're playing against an Imperial Guardsman and your Imperial Guardsman has a big Rogel Dorn, that Rogel Dorn battle tank might be able to kill you and shoot your models off of an objective, so now you are no longer scoring that objective. But at that point in time, that's all that's happened. He stopped you from scoring. Now, if I'm playing Blood Angels and I send my JPI or my Sanguinary Guard or whatever out, and I kill the Rogel Dorn that is on an objective, I kill that Rogel Dorn, I'm doing two things. One, I am, in fact, denying my opponent's objective the same way he denied my objective. But in addition to that, I'm also forcing my opponent's hand, because now my opponent has to deal with the Sanguinary Guard or the JPI or whatever charged and killed his tank, because if he doesn't, he's going to be giving me points. This doesn't happen when we're playing into when a shooting army kills you, because when a shooting army is going to be annihilating you, if they're not on that objective, they're not forcing your hand into what you have to deal with right now. So one of the cool things about Blood Angels is that you can really force your opponent to deal with you where you want your opponent to deal with you and when you want your opponent to deal with you. So that's a big benefit. All right, so let's start talking about some of these buying staples. And actually, I'm going to be giving you actually a lot of a list so that you guys can get an idea of what list you want to start with. So here's a buying guide. So this is core staples. First things that you need to think about is that fast trading units. These are really important. Things like your JPI, even scouts. I know scouts are something that a lot of people think are like, wait, those aren't fast. But they are, because consider this. They infiltrate, so they can deploy 9 inches away from your opponent's deployment zone. They also scout 6 inches. This can be extremely useful for deploying very aggressively. And if you go second, you just scout them backwards into cover where your opponent can't deal with them. Or you can deploy them further back, and if you go first, you can scout them forward so that you can put a lot of pressure on your opponent early. Now, if you're playing something like the Liberator Assault Group or the new Rage Cursed Onslaught, those scouts become actually devastating in melee. Liberator Assault Group, you get +1 attack and +2 strength, meaning you're going in with 21 attacks at strength 6, AP 1, damage 1. That is a lot of damage for a 70-point unit. Rage Cursed Onslaught, you're going in with 26 attacks at strength 5, potentially strength 5, AP 2, damage 1. So these units have an insane ability to punch up. Objective pressure, kind of like what we just spoke about, the difference between a melee unit taking a objective versus a shooting unit dealing with an objective. This is a big deal about how we put pressure on scoring for those objectives. Action efficiency. This is a big deal for all more elite armies. And Marines, while they're not elite, they're getting to that elite level. They're generally going to only have, your 12, maybe 13 units in an army, which can be significantly less than a Gene Stealer Culture army or an Orcs army or an Imperial Guard army, these things. So you don't necessarily have a ton of units that are there to do actions or to do your secondaries, so you really want quality ones. Some of the best ones, in my opinion, would be things like, I don't know, the scouts that I just mentioned, because they have the ability to go uppy downy, and so you can always reposition them on the board. Or things like the lieutenant with combi weapon. Now, this is a fairly basic marine unit, but what you're going to find is that he pops up in a lot of armies. Another one would be the Calidus, which I highly recommend for any marine player of any flavor. You need to get yourself a Calidus assassin and use her as an ally, because she does something that no one else in the game does, and it's incredibly valuable. So then let's talk about some of the unique units that you're definitely going to be wanting to take a look at in your armies for Blood Angels. And it doesn't matter what detachment you're playing. It doesn't matter if you're playing Codex compliant chapters or the Blood Angel specific chapters, or detachments, forgive me. You're going to want some Sanguinary Guard. This is a very, very powerful, unique unit. They are an elite infantry unit, and thank goodness now they hit on 2s. They have a high strength of going to be strength 6. They have a high AP of either going to be AP3 or AP2, depending on whether you have the sword or the spear. And then if you have the spear, you have lance built in. And the fact that these guys move 12 inches base means that you're typically going to be the one charging, meaning you like lance. This also stacks with the other portions of the Blood Angels armies, which in two of the Blood Angel detachments, you actually get bonus attacks for charging. So that is a very, very fantastic thing that you can do to stack with this. So Sanguinary Guard are incredible. They're also hyper durable for elite infantry units, because in melee, they're -1 to be hit and -1 to be wounded when they're led by characters, which could really skew the math on your opponents that are coming into them. So with that, that's what I say there. Then we're looking at things like Death Company with jump packs. And one really important thing about your Death Company with jump packs, these are very easy to convert models. Like, if you don't want to go and buy the Death Company with jump packs, just buy normal jump pack assault intercessors. Give an extra one a power fist, and then find a slightly larger sword than a normal power sword and model it on there. Now you've got your eviscerator. Boom. You don't need to pay for the Death Company with jump pack. Okay, it's a very easy kit bash to accomplish. I'm not saying that you should ever go third party or anything, wink wink, but I am highly recommending that if you don't want to shell out the cash, the dough for your Death Company Marines, just use your normal jump back assault intercessors. And on the same vein, if you wanted to be using your foot Death Company, which is generally not recommended outside of one detachment, but that's only for 10th edition, then you could basically create them out of your normal assault intercessors. You just got to get a little creative with how you're going to be making the two-handed eviscerator sword. But outside of that, it's very easy to be converting your Death Company your Death Company from either your normal assault intercessors or your jump pack assault intercessors. And if it's Death Company with bolt rifles you're trying to make, just use normal intercessors. But honestly, don't do it, because those models suck. That doesn't mean, however, that they won't suck in 11th edition. So is it still worth it to pick up those models? In my opinion, if you're going to be a Blood Angels player, yes, you should get the Death Company Marines, or you should at least kit bash and convert them up. Now, the Ball Predator, and currently in 10th edition, is an incredible unit. As a matter of fact, I am of the very strong opinion that the Ball Predator is the best Blood Angels unit that we can actually muster right now. He's an incredible model for a very low price point that does something that is just absolutely incredible in the game. Probably the best flamer unit in the entire game, for pretty cheap. It's lightning fast, and it has an incredibly powerful flamer with a very good distance on it. It's extremely reliable, and in one of the new detachments, the Rage Curse Onslaught, now it can give you access to sticky objectives. It's amazing. It's fantastic. The only problem with the Ball Predator, if you're starting Blood Angels now, is recognizing that in 11th edition, it might not exist, because it is a much older kit. And what we are seeing is that a lot of the original, not even original, but a lot of the firstborn Marine units are starting to go to Legends and be kicked out as we're getting the new models that GW is making. So things like your Vindicators, your normal Predator Destructors, Predator Annihilator, the Ball Predator, these things might be disappearing in 11th. I could be very wrong, but if you're looking for units to invest in that are going to be a little bit future-proof, this might not be the best one for you. But, roll the dice, because honestly, I love the Ball Predator. I wouldn't be playing 10th edition without it. It is my favorite unit in the Blood Angels Codex, so just give you that caveat. Then you got to recognize that Blood Angel characters are some of the best characters in the entire freaking game, especially in 10th edition. But moving on towards 11th edition, I don't really expect to see this change. Chief Librarian Mephiston, the Sanguinor are both if they're not the two best lone ops in the game, they're both in the top 5. That's for sure, and they're both in the same army, which is exceptionally powerful. Dante is an incredible model. He is one of the stronger chapter masters in the game. I know a lot of people don't like him because he does not generate CP, but what he gives to a unit is absolutely stunning, and the model is gorgeous. So he is a pretty much must-have. Mr. Lamartes and Mr. Astaroth, I recommend getting them, even though I don't particularly think they're that good in 10th edition, because 11th edition is right around the corner, and we don't know how they're going to be used there. Not to mention, in the new Rage Cursed Onslaught, your Lamartes is actually a very, very reasonable and good unit, and it's possible you can make an argument for why you might want Astaroth in the new detachment as well. So even though these are going to be like two of the less good characters, back in Index, Lamartes was insane. He was amazing. So it's like there are going to be times where he's very good. There's going to be times where they're going to be less good, but that's the nature of Warhammer. But the characters, the unique characters for Blood Angels in particular, are always, as a whole, going to be very good. So I highly recommend if you're being a Blood Angel player, you buy the unique characters. And then lastly, we're going to have to start figuring out a standard Space Marine Corps. And in some of the lists that I've made for you guys today, what you're going to notice is that there's some repeated units that you're just going to need if you're going to be a Marine player. And I'll just rattle a few of them off. You're going to need a unit of intercessors, which is going to come standard with like basically any box set, with any like starter set, any like combat patrol, whatever. So that's not a problem. You're going to want gladiators. I personally have 2 gladiators. I should probably get a third, but I've got 2. I just didn't glue the turrets on, so I can swap the turret out for which version of the gladiator I want to be using. Whether it's going to be the Lancer, it's almost always the Lancer. The Reaper, sometimes it's the Reaper, or the Valiant. It's never the Valiant right now, but that doesn't mean it won't be the Valiant in next edition. So just get the gladiators. Don't glue the turrets down so that you can just swap them out really, really easily. You need those gladiators. They're super, super good. I've already mentioned that scouts are incredible. You're going to want scouts. The Combi Lieutenant is incredible. There are a core amount of Space Marine units that are just going to be working in every single Space Marine detachment. Infiltrators are a very good example of this. Infiltrators have this 12-inch denial bubble. I love Incursors in my Blood Angels army, but they're not going to be required. So if you're not certain that you want the Incursors, you don't need to buy Incursors. So just keep in mind that there are certain core Space Marine units that get a big glow up. In 10th edition, the Blade Guard veterans have been amazing in the Blood Angels armies, especially now that we've got a Fights First enhancement in 2 of our detachments. You can always put that Fights First on a unit on a chaplain, meaning the chaplain can give the Blade Guard vets +1 to wound. Both of those detachments have ways to give the Blade Guard vets more strength, and then so you could be like, all right, I'm getting extra attacks, I'm getting extra strength, I'm getting +1 to wound, and I'm getting fight first on these units. What you can see is that there's some really good combos from some of the standard Space Marine units existing in the game. But that doesn't mean you need every single Space Marine. Like, you don't really need Tech Marines if you're going to be playing Blood Angels. You don't really need Land Raiders if you're going to be playing Blood Angels, although there's an argument for a Land Raider. But once again, a Land Raider is one of those firstborn units that I'd probably be steering clear and away from right now, simply because it does seem like a lot of the firstborn units are being retired, and GW is now updating things for the new era. All right, let's talk a little bit more about the buying guide. I want to talk about some traps that people fall for when they're establishing a Blood Angel army. First off, overinvesting in non-Blood Angel SKUs. What you might see some people do is they might go like, oh, hey, listen, Liberator Assault Group is very good for Blade Guard veterans, so I'm going to get 18 Blade Guard veterans. Well, that doesn't mean that in 11th edition, 12th edition, 13th edition, whatever, Blade Guard veterans are going to be good in Blood Angels. If I were you, if I'm playing Blood Angels, the only real SKUs I'm going to be investing in is going to be in more Blood Angel units in particular. Because what you'll find is that your Blood Angel specific units are basically always going to be better. And when I say basically, I mean basically, not actually. There are always going to be exceptions to this. But your Blood Angel specific units are typically going to be of a better service to you than the generic units. That doesn't mean generic units aren't supportive and you don't need any of them. But I wouldn't be, if I was worried about a budget for building a Blood Angel army, I wouldn't be over investing in these non-Blood Angel unit SKUs. Non-supportive or redundant profiles. So let me give you a great example of this. Like, I like Blade Guard vets, but I take a 6 in an army. I could come up with a reasonably good idea for why I might take 12 in a Rage Cursed Onslaught army, but think about the profile, okay? It's Strength 5, AP 2, Damage 2. Well, on my Sanguinary Guard, I've already got 4 attacks at strike 6, AP 3 damage too. I'm a 2 up, 4 up versus the Blade Guard, which are a 3 up, 4 up when it comes to defensive profiles. They move 6, I move 12. The difference being what leaders can attach to them, and that does make quite a big difference, but many times what you'll find is that your specific units are going to fit the role better than a lot of the generic Space Marine units. So don't over-invest. That doesn't mean don't invest at all. It just means I would recommend not over-investing in your non-Blood Angel specific unit SKUs. And this goes for any detachment for Space Marines that you're playing, right? Like if you're playing Dark Angels, I wouldn't over-invest in the generic Space Marine units. Niche Marine units that may slot well. So, for example, how would I say this? I absolutely love Incursors in Blood Angels. I take a unit of Incursors in almost every Blood Angel list I make because their sustained hits 1 really stacks with the bonus attacks that you get and the bonus strength. They become actually very, very valuable in Blood Angels. But I wouldn't be taking lots and lots and lots of Incursors just because they're like a unit is good in Blood Angels. Trust me, you're going to want your points and your money spent majority on the Blood Angel specific units themselves. But also, while I say this, you don't want to really ignore normal Marine units. A lot of times, just having a single Gladiator Lancer can bring your entire army together because now that you've got all this really, really good melee pressure, it's really nice to be able to pop a transport. And a Gladiator Lancer is going to do that better than anything specific to Blood Angels that you have. So it doesn't mean that we want to ignore your generic Marine units, but it does mean that if we're looking at investing, we probably want to lean more towards the Blood Angel specific stuff. Now, to that fact, I actually think the current Combat Patrol is awesome. The current Combat Patrol comes with both a Blood Angel Captain and 6 Sanguinary Guard, which is a fantastic start for a Blood Angel army. You also get 10 Assault Intercessors, which can be very useful if you want to leave them as Assault Intercessors, or you can easily convert those things into Death Company Marines. So I'm going to give you 3 lists to take a look at. And these, I'm not going to explain them 100% here, but I'm going to just give them to you so that you can see like how lists are generally made for Blood Angels, and so that you can kind of get an idea of what you might want to start with if you're looking to get like maybe a 2,500 to 3,000 point collection. So list number 1, this is an all-comers list that I've made. This is a Liberated Assault Group list. So what we do is we go Chief Librarian Mephiston, Commander Dante, the Sanguinor, and the Chaplain of Speed of Primarch, which is the Fight First enhancement. This army is amazing. What it does is it takes lanes, it hits very, very hard, but it also has the ability to fire, to have some very strong fire support in the background. So that Chaplain with the Fights First is going to be going with 6 Blade Guard veterans. I have 1 Incursor squad. That Incursor squad is going to start in the Impulsor, which gives the Impulsor a 6-inch scout move. After you scout in the beginning of the game, you can disembark the Incursors and jump your Blade Guard veterans and the Chaplain inside the Impulsor, basically 100% guaranteeing that Impulsor gets to move 18 inches turn 1. It also makes it much easier to deploy because you can avoid certain firing angles using your scout move on the Impulsor. So it is a great move. Put a scout unit that has the scout keyword, not scouts, sorry. And I know that can be confusing, but a unit with the scout keyword inside the Impulsor, if it can go in there, to give you that free bonus turn 1 movement. Then I've got 6 Sanguinary Guard. That's going to be running generally with Commander Dante. I've got 3 Sanguinary Guard that are going to be going solo. I've got 2 Ball Predators. I've already spoken about how incredible these Ball Predators are. They're such good mid-board bullies. Then I've got 2 Gladiator Lancers to be incredible anti-tank units. I've got the Impulsor to transport my Blade Guard veterans, and then I've got that super sweet Calidus Assassin that was jumping around. So this is an amazing all-comers list that can be run on any terrain, and it can be run against any army in the game, and it's going to be happy to go. Let's look at list number 2. So this would be a Angelic Inheritors list. This was the Grotmus detachment that the Blood Angels got last Christmas, and it's been going strong. I have never been the biggest fan of this detachment because it's not really the way I like to run the game, but it is a very, very good detachment. So I figured I'd give you like an idea of how to run this one, and it runs a little bit differently than the Liberated Assault Group one does. So you're going to take still Mephiston and the Sanguinor here, because in this detachment, all character units get to reroll hit rolls and wound rolls of 1, which makes those 2 lone ops much better, and I love those lone ops. So I guess that part of the list I absolutely adore. Then I go 3 captains with jump packs with 3 units of Sanguinary Guard. In this detachment, I'm probably generally going to be taking the Sanguinary Guard with spears, although one of them will still have swords. The reason why I do that is because you don't get the strength bonus in this detachment or the attacks bonus in this detachment. So having access to lance whenever you charge is very, very nice. Now we do have a stratagem in this detachment for a lethal and a lance, so that you could put that on a unit of sanguinary guard with swords. Also, if I didn't mention already, you should definitely magnetize the weapons on your models, so that when the meta changes, if you want to swap the models, the weapons out, you could just swap the weapons out without having to buy brand new models. Magnets are your friend. Then we have one squad of scouts because they're just incredibly useful for doing actions and secondaries at pre-game skirmishes, one ball predator, double lancer, and the Calidus assassin. Now, in addition to this, we take a squad of Death Company Marines with jump packs who are going to be led by a Death Company captain with jump pack. This Death Company captain is going to be giving them, sustained hits. Now, because of the detachment rule, they're going to get to re-roll wound rolls of 1 already. They already, and they get fallbacks in charge. And they already get 4 rerolls to hit, and you can give them access to the strat for lethal hits. So now it's only you can get lethal, sustained hits, 4 rerolls to hit on any target you want. So this unit no longer needs Oath of Moment, which is very supportive for what Marines want to do. And then we're going to wrap this whole army up with a 6 Inceptor Squad, which is an extremely powerful anti-elite infantry unit because they've got that sweet, sweet flat 3 damage. It can also threaten tanks with the AP3 flat 3 damage with twin linked, meaning you get to re-roll the wound rolls, because in this detachment, you can give it sustained hits. So this is a great all-comers list that just plays differently. It doesn't hit as hard in the face as the Liberator Assault Group list does, but it does have a lot more tech pieces to it. And then lastly, I wanted to show you the new Rage Curse Onslaught. That's just all about killing and tabling your opponent, but you're still got to play good, smart Warhammer. So we're still going to take Chief Librarian Mephiston. We're going to take the Sanguinar. In this detachment, I am going to bring Lamartes. Please note, Lamartes didn't make the other 2 detachments. We have a captain with jump pack with the Angel's Fang and a Thunderhammer. This is going to give him sustained hits too. And so if you use your Oath of Moment on the target, he is just going to get a lot of hits out there. He's also going to get to reroll wound rolls of 1, which can help him get a few more devastating wounds with that Thunderhammer, especially if he's going into his Oath of Moment target and gets some good sustained hits. Then we have the Chaplain with Master of the Red First, which is once again a fights first. So notice in this detachment, similar to the Liberator Assault Group, I kept the Chaplain with Blade Guard Veterans because they get bonus attacks, they get bonus strength, they still get that +1 to wound, and the fights first makes them absolutely brutal. I do have 10 Death Company Marines with jump packs with Lamartes. Now, what Lamartes does for your Death Company Marines with jump packs is he gives them -1 damage. This is typically good, but there's still Marine bodies which die very easily, but in this detachment, you can also give them a 5, but feel no pain. So I like that because it does make them significantly more durable in this detachment than it does in other detachments. We take 5 Incursors, because we're still going to do the Impulsor trick. We take 5 Infiltrators, because it's just a good all-round unit that basically every Marine list should have access to. 2 squads of Sanguinary Guard, Scouts, Ball Predator, and Calidus Assassins. Notice in this detachment, we don't necessarily have good anti-tank, but we do have some incredible melee punching power due to all of the stratagems and the enhancements from the Rage Curse Onslaught. Now, let's shift gears for just a moment. I want to talk about practicing with limited amounts of time in the game. When you don't have time to play, you don't get to play 2 games a week. You get to play 1-2 games a month. Maybe you only get to play at tournaments. What you got to recognize is you are going to have to do some form of practice. This is a very high level skill, and if you don't have any practice time, then it's going to be tough for you. But if you only get 1-2 games a month, here's how we can actually increase the efficiency of our practice when we're going through this with this army, and we can do this with any army. Do deployment reps with re-racks. So I like to do turn 1 and 2 focus. So if you deploy, draw your cards, get your position, see where your opponent gets their position on turn 1, do your initial skirmishing, and just take note of what is going to be your potential to actually get to your opponent and or score points. If you see that you're in a really bad position because you're not going to be able to get certain units in certain positions due to something that your opponent has done because they're just going to easily kill your models or something of the such, well, then you probably made a big mistake in deployment. If you see that things went really, really bad early on, what I recommend doing is a re-rack. Concede, restart the game, redo your deployment with a focus on understanding exactly where you're going to be going turn 1, regardless of whether you go first or second. When we do this, what happens is we deploy in such a way that if we go second, our opponent can't see us, they can't shoot us, they can't do anything. But if we go first, we're able to score any secondary that we may draw. People like to think that secondaries are random and you can really get screwed by your secondaries. which I guess is technically possible, but it's not nearly as random as you might think, because remember, it's not a random secondary that you draw out of the deck. What happens is that you have 19 secondaries that you can draw. So when we deploy, we should deploy to be able to score any secondary that we can draw. So we deploy with the knowledge that we could draw any of these 19 secondaries, and out of those 19 secondaries, about 14 of them we can score if we draw them. There's a few of them that require our opponents to be in certain positions to score them, and there really is nothing you can do about that. But focus on deployment so that no matter what, you know where your models are moving, regardless of whether you go first or second. If you find yourself in a really terrible position and limited practice time, don't be afraid to be like, hey, listen, I concede, can we restart? And then you try to do a better deployment. This will serve you dramatically when you're improving your skills. This is not to say that you should never just play a struggle game when you know you're starting out at a disadvantage. You should, but I'm talking about how do we maximize when we have limited time to play with. Then I always want you to take pictures at the start of every single turn. You're going to ask yourself, what terrain, what missions are you playing on? Because that will dictate what type of units that you're going to be bringing. This will tell you, oh, hey, I'm playing on WTC terrain. Perhaps I don't need the Impulsor for my Blade Guard veterans because the terrain is dense enough that I can't get shot turn 1, and it's easy enough for me to get into position without exposing myself. Which means that gives you an extra 80 points in your army to take another unit, perhaps Intercessors or Incursors, something like this. What meta are you building for? Do you know you're going to be playing into lots of Victrix Honor Guard? Because if so, you might want to be equipping your Sanguinary Guard with Carmine Blades for that sweet AP3 as opposed to the AP2 on the Lance. These are questions that you ask, and this is what we do when we're practicing with limited time. We do focused reps, we re-rack to get better deployments. We take pictures at the start of every single turn so that when we're reviewing our game, we can see our position and see what other choices we could have made to try to make our decision-making process more clean in the future. We make sure that we make our list specifically for the missions and the terrain we're playing on. This is almost always revealed to you in the player pack for your tournament ahead of time so that you can make a list for your tournament in particular. Please note this is very different than, say, tailoring your list in a friendly match against your friend. I don't think you should ever do that, but you should design your list specifically for the tournament that you are thinking about. And then you got to identify what's the real goal when you're playing. We're learning correct play. So we want to make sure that we're not doing things like just throwing our models at our opponent and hoping the dice bail us out. We want to make sure that we're not doing things like just blaming dice when dice go bad. We want to ask ourselves, how could I have positioned myself so the bad dice couldn't have screwed me? Blood Angels reward intention when you're playing. It's knowing about when to pick your engagements and when to back off. And some of this you're only going to get through experience, but some of it you can actually math in your head. You can figure out, oh, I can charge these Sanguinary Guard into a Satan, but a Satan has a 4-up invuln and they half damage, and all my damage output is 2. So if he's got a 4-up invuln, let's say I do perfect damage. I hit with everything and I wound with everything. So I deal 36 damage into a Satan. But they have a 4-up invuln, which means they're going to save half of those, which means they've taken 18 damage. Because they also half the damage. So instead of taking only 2 damage each, well, now they're also only suffering 1 damage. And then they also have a 5-up Feel No Pain. So out of the 18 wounds that they suffer, they should save 1/3 of them, meaning they only take 12 wounds, which means if you have perfect hits and perfect wounds, which will never happen, the Satan won't die. So that's how I like to run math. So you get to know, oh, this is actually a really bad target for unit X or whatever, right? So have intention, but you can, and get your reps, but you can also math out the averages for what units should do what. And this can help you understand when to kill and when to stage. So guys, this is my guide to getting competitive with Blood Angels. I told you the units that you want to be looking to purchase. I told you some of the units that you might want to avoid if you're budget conscious. If you're not budget conscious, buy everything. That's the way it goes. But I really gave you a really great head start on certain list designs that you might want to think about for Blood Angels. And I gave you a good breakdown of the units and the characters that you want to be looking at. So with that, I'm going to take off for today. And I hope you all have a very Merry Christmas. I might have a video posted later this week as well, but it is Christmas, so who knows? I might just be spending it with the family. So with that, I love y'all. Crump on. Bye-bye.